PMC third. We believe that the weighing mechanism in today's round should be net benefits. The first reason for this is that it is the most predictable and equitable in today's round. But the second reason why you're going to prefer net benefits is because it subsumes all other frameworks. The only way we can test the efficacy of other political advocacies is through consequentialism. Fourth, we think that fiat is a way to interrogate power structures and alleviate suffering. Second is the inherency. Basically, the DREAM Act is an act that protects the rights of undocumented immigrant minors in the United States, and currently it is trying to be removed by this appropriations bill that is the topic of the resolution. So the plan is to basically do what the resolution says, which is the Democratic Caucus will publicly announce through social media, through news media, that they are not going to follow through on, they're not going to vote for this bill unless it includes the DREAM Act. And secondly, we see that Democrats often follow through with the Democratic Caucus, so obviously we have fiat through to make sure that the Democrats will do this. Okay. So next, the first reason you're going to be voting for the affirmation is obviously the DREAM Act. First of all, we see that Republicans are on the brink. We see that Democratic approval, according to a Gallup poll, is 7%, that independents have viewed Democrats as more favorable. That secondly, we see that recent elections have also shown that Democrats' approval is increasing, that in New Jersey and Virginia, governorships were awarded to Democrats. But secondly, we see that in Florida specifically, we have seen Republican districts that have been Republican for decades now going to Democrats. So Republicans are on the brink in the fact that they want to protect their generally Republican districts, and that's going away from them because of the approval ratings that are going down. We see that, moreover, a government shutdown threatens their reliability. We see historically a government shutdown always takes away the party in power. Look to the warrant in 2013. Even though the Republicans were the stem root of the government shutdown, Democrats in the Senate were voted out specifically because of this government shutdown, because most of the American public perceives the party in power as responsible for a government shutdown. Second, we see that Republicans are holding off in the status quo, which means this bill won't be passed in the status quo. We see that they don't want to associate with Trump, and Trump has endorsed this bill, and they're trying to move away from Trump because that is the main reason why independents are voting against him. Yes?
So this is the bill that funds the federal government, and are you telling me that this is what Republicans are opposing in the status quo? Yeah, so we see that the main warrant here is Susan Collins, who voted against the healthcare bill, has also not agreed to vote for the for the appropriations bill, and that currently in the status quo, this bill won't be passed. So, on to the two link scenarios. First, the government shuts down. We think that the government shutting down is going to be a net benefit in today's debate because that's always going to put Republicans out of power. We see that historically, as we proved you in 2013, the party in power is always going to be removed if a government shuts down. That's going to be really important because we see that Democrats will win key elections based on their new political capital and their new approval ratings, which means that they'll be able to recontrol Congress and recontrol Senate. We think this is super important because Democrats in Congress are always going to be good for a couple of reasons. First, they're focusing on climate change instead of defunding the EPA, and climate change is really key, as we've seen the hurricanes that have happened this year and the fact that it is threatening global extinction. But secondly, we see that Democrats in the Senate are able to check back against Donald Trump's rhetoric and check back against Donald Trump's violence, which is going to be really important because we see that his rhetoric with North Korea could stem a nuclear war. We see that Democrats are also a net benefit to those in poverty because they're always creating social services programs that help people get out of the sick version of poverty. The second scenario is that DACA that the government doesn't shut down, but DACA still gets passed. We see that this is a net benefit because you're always helping undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants are really important to the economy of the United States. That for even they're part of 5% less. They're 5% of states' funding would provide $11 billion each year, according to a Reuters study. But moreover, the quality of life of these immigrants is really key. If you're sending minors back, that's going to be really harsh to the quality of life instead of having a new life in America. But third off, we see that oftentimes undocumented immigrants are put into prisons before they're deported, which further dehumanizes and decreases their quality of life. We also see that Democrats will benefit of these undocumented immigrants being in the United States because they have a new voter base, which means that they'll always be benefited by them increasing that voter base, and that means that our impacts also extend in this scenario too. And the impacts of this also extend in the previous scenario because we see that if Democrats are able to get into power, they're able to reapprove the DACA bill. On to the next reason you're going to be voting for the affirmation. That's Democrat approval. We see that currently the public views Democrats as weak and views Democrats as not strong in positions, and this is really key because even if they are going to win congressional elections, there's no way they're going to win the presidential election right now. We see that people are angry at candidates like Clinton and Sanders who flip-flop on gay marriage and flip-flop on gun control. We also see that there are no strong stances, that Democrats are viewed as the compromisers, while Republicans who filibuster like Ted Cruz in the Senate are always viewed as the stronger party. We see that the second uniqueness point is that Cory Booker is leading the efforts against DACA. He called it catastrophic, and he's led numerous discussions just this week on leaders of immigrant groups and DACA recipients. We see that third, Cory Booker has viewed
created a press conference on the Capitol Hill this month, which is always key to viewing that he's the leader of this movement, because we see that press conferences are a very clear perceptual link, that helps the public perceive that Cory Booker is the leader of this effort. So the links is that when the plan passes, we see the Democrats are viewed as more perceptually dominant because they're finally standing up for their beliefs, and that's the main criticism against Democrats right now. But more specifically, we see that Democrats have a rallying point, a leader to rally against. We see that the reason why Democrats are not going to win the status quo, even with Trump's lower approval rating, is that there is literally no viable candidate for the 2020 election. There's no rallying point for leadership of the Democrats. That means that providing this leadership is always going to be key. With Cory Booker getting more press and the American public perceiving him as the leader of this movement, that means that Cory Booker gets the political capital and approval ratings he needs to run for president in 2020. We see that in July he has not decided to vote for president. He's still thinking about it, but Washington Post says that all signs point to him running for president. We see that Cory Booker is always going to be good for a couple of reasons. First of all, he sets a precedent as being an African-American president. We see that a lot of people are like, oh, Obama's an African-American president, which is really good, but they think it's a one-time thing, especially after Donald Trump won and the American public sent a international perception that they don't care about electing more diverse candidates. This is going to set a precedent that no, it wasn't a one-time thing, that we actually are a diverse country. But secondly, we think that Cory Booker is a moderate on the issues like economy, which is always going to be key to compromising and creating future policy. But he is not a moderate in issues like the environment and foreign policy, which is really important because we think that those are the two most important issues in today's debate. But moreover, we think that Cory Booker is always going to be a net benefit because we think that Cory Booker is younger, and that makes him able to appeal to younger voters, which are the main voting base that Democrats are losing right now. If Cory Booker is younger and he's able to help incite more younger voters to go to the voting booths, that means that Democrats have a larger voting base and are always net benefited by that. Also, Cory Booker is always going to be better than Donald Trump, whose rhetoric and policies are hurting the United States, clearly through the North Korea and environment example. So for those two reasons, we strongly urge a vote in the affirmation.
Time starts now. First, the thesis, me and Neerakandan recognize our complicity in the racism that's going on right now, specifically the xenophobia against immigrants. We say that we are all products of this privileged society. We reinforce the current system that's going on. Me and Neerakandan, we don't, we're not doing a whole bunch to help immigrants. We're not really, we live as, we benefit from the system that actually is disenfranchised these immigrants, and we recognize that we're part of the problem. We say that they don't, and recognizing that we're part of the problem needs to come first. Links. One. Specifically, they're asking the government to actually solve for societal problems. They're saying oh, the Democrats, should go out and pass the DREAM Act or stop this bill from passing or whatever, and they should be the ones solving all the societal issues. They shouldn't, it's the government that should be going out and doing things, not individuals. They're saying the government actually needs to come first, which is really problematic. Next, they frame people as products in their environment instead of people that are actually making individual moral choices. Specifically, they talk about how, when the government shuts down, people are just going to vote for their party in power. They don't frame actually people as making a choice. And they just say when Cory Booker's actually talking about in press conferences, they say people are just going to view him as perceptually dominant and just vote for him, right? They don't actually talk about individual choice as a moral aspect of anything that's going on. Next is the impacts. Yeah.
Isn't voting an individual choice?
You're making these arguments about how things that happen in society are just going to cause these massive aggregate shifts. You're not talking about the individual decision and how individuals actually interface with those things that are going on in the real world. First, the impacts. Advancing government action for actually caressing your own role, shift the responsibility away from the individual. The ASA point of this is action on a large stage separates our action from the consequences they have. We just view action as not having any consequences. It's just the government that matters, not the individual choices that we're making. The B sub under this leads to disillusionment because we don't feel we can do anything. It's just the government that matters. The C sub under this kills activism, which turns the case specifically because people see themselves as disempowered and unable to actually cause real change in the world. This kills all local activism. And we say against delocalized sources of violence, such as environmental damage or actual xenophobia and racism. This is the most important thing. People actually need to recognize their own role and the things they're doing to the people around them to actually cause the bad things that are happening. The second impact is tagline choice to act. The A sub under this is they focus on factors that lead to action instead of the actual choices that people are making. The B sub under this is this means we never actually problematize racism or actually damaging the environment because people can always be held accountable, or because we never think people can be held accountable. They're just products of their environment. It's not people who are actually making individual moral choices. The C sub under this perpetuates all the harms that they talk about in the affirmative. Both the impacts actually turn case. Next is the alternative. Vote negative to to recognize your own complicity in racism and use it as a starting point to change broader networks of power. Vote negative to recognize your own complicity in racism and use it as a starting point to change broader networks of power. Next to the alt solvency. Oh yeah, sure.
Status of the alt.
I'm done. Yes.
So if a bunch of individuals, for instance, in the civil rights movement come together to create change, would you say that's bad?
No.
Okay.
Alt solvency. 1. Local analysis is the only way to actually analyze politics because it politicizes the way we think. The ace point of this is the only way we can actually change our relations to power is by changing our relationship with our own personal responsibility in creating structures of power. The B point of this is the all actually creates authentic social movements because we're actually recognizing the only way in which we interface with the power structures in the world and actually changing the way that we're actually interfacing with, or changing our own actions and shaping how we actually interface with these issues. The C point of this leads to effective local activism, which is the only way to actually solve for delocalized violence because we're specifically the ones that are actually causing the harms, and we are pinpointing people that are actually causing the harms first. The second argument is that government action must come second after recognizing your own complicity. The A point of this is that government action has to come second to actually trigger the impacts of the K. The B point under this is the F prioritize government action at the cost of actually killing social movements because they prioritize government action at the cost of actually just depoliticizing local activism, making people think that they can't actually make a change. The C point under this is what we say that local activism. We say that local activism is the gateway to actually good types of government action. We have to engage in local activism, recognize our own complicity before we actually go to the government and ask for changes, because that's the only way that we're actually going to solve delocalized violence. Government is the second step, not the first. The third argument is that the ballot is key. The A point of this is that the ballot represents you recognizing your own complicity in these forms of violence. The B point of this is that the people actually talk about the round and you voting on the ballot endorses the side of the advocacy, means more people actually run and spills over more. The C point of this is there's way more activism. There's way more activism in the community, actually people in policy making, means that you have critical thinking. Means the critical positions have more solvency in the real world. Framework. Roll the ballot. Vote for the team that best engages the individual in the political process. Vote for the team that best engages the individual in the political process. All the impacts or benefits of the roll of the ballot. The first argument in the framework is the athletes must defend their methodology before the feed objects that can't actually sever out of their own methodology. Otherwise, it lets them lever case against the K and just ignores the real impacts that they're making, and they're also severing, which leads to total collapse and fairness. The second argument is that fiat is illusory. The plan never passes, therefore you never actually get access to the end of the world. We're secondly talking about the B argument on there. This is the critical arguments. Actually change our orientation of the world instead of just how we shape policy. Most of us aren't actually going to become policymakers. That means the critical argumentation actually comes first. The third argument is the speech acts are binding. The point under this is that discourse shapes the way we think, and specifically rearranges the unconscious biases that we have, just the words people use, and discourse is also the totality of what we can recognize. The things that people say are the only things that we know. The B argument under this is that if discourse isn't binding, it leads to total collapse and fairness because there are moving targets and just shift out of the advocacy they've put forth. Cool. Yeah.
On the alt, how do we recognize complicity and racism?
Well, like I say it's a subjective thing, right? It's a process of reflecting on your own role in society and how you're actually perpetuating structures of power.
One other thing?
I need to cover case. Cool. Case. So go to the first advantage. A few responses here. Terminal defense against all the policy changes they're saying the Democrats are actually going to pass. Trump vetoes literally everything. As long as Trump is in power, the Democrats can't actually do anything. Yeah. Next. We say that having Cory Booker as the new leader of the Democratic Party leads to a racist backlash. You saw specifically with Obama, where Republican candidates got a lot more popular. Specifically, you have to engage in local activism first in order to actually solve this issue that leads, creates political change on the large scale level. Next. Actually, I have 3 seconds, so yeah.
Starting time.
A is the interpretation. The negation may not fiat a change in mindset. B is the violation. They're very clearly fiating a change in mindset where they're somehow forcing us to recognize our own complicity. Either one, they are the only ones recognizing their own complicity, which is going to lead to a very marginal impact, or two, they're forcing everyone in this room to recognize their own complicity, which is going to bite me as a she's. C are standards. The first standard is going to be resolvability. The A point is that you cannot weigh a change in mindset. That I cannot compare how much a judge is recognizing their own complicity to how much I am comparing their own complicity, which means that we have literally no weighing argument that the debate becomes irresolvable. The B subpoint under here, Actually, no. The next standard is going to be ground that we have literally no ground at all. That we cannot just say magically that we cannot recognize our own complicity because that's going to gut resolvability because there's no intrinsic way to resolve the debate if it's only a he said she said scenario where we're saying we can't recognize our own complicity and they're saying you can recognize your own complicity. D, our voters, First, competitive equity in education are always going to be voters' axiomatic. That's why parents and schools fund debate in the first place. The second thing is that you should drop the team. The abuse has already occurred, and that is incentivize this. The issue to be running was that it's a structural abuse, and that they've already skewed the MG strat. The next argument is that even if you don't drop the team, you should drop the argument, which means you drop the K or drop the alt something. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you say your input trip again?
The interpretation is that the negation may not fiat a change in mindset. Onto the K. Overview to the K. The problem here is that it is completely not competitively not competitive with the affirmative plan at the point where they are saying that their second alt sovereignty point is that government action must take place after. We think that the most logical perm is always going to be perm. Do the non-competitive parts of the alt, and then do the F. So basically recognize complicity in racism and use it as a starting point for change in local politics, and then do the affirmation plan. We think that the go to alt first. We think that the first net benefit to the perm is going to be coalition building, and specifically when people are able to spotlight local issues and then move grassroots movement. That's always going to be key to making actual political change. The second net benefit here is going to be praxis. That the only thing they're doing is saying, we can recognize complicity and somehow have starting point for change. But if they only create a starting point and don't actually follow through with the rest of this change, and that means that their alt is completely useless. The next argument, the next net benefit is going to be that of the entirety of the app, to the point where they're uncovering a large portion of the impacts of the app. That means that we're the only ones who actually get access to it at the point where you're gonna buy the perm. And this adds to the alt. The first argument here is that this is pretty ivory tower. We think that the problem with the alt is that it doesn't take into account how interpersonal relationships actually work. That the only thing we're doing is evaluating ourselves. We're not evaluating ourselves in the context of others. That when they say that we need to be in charge of a personal responsibility, that we agree that the perm is always going to do that better. But the problem with the alt is it only recognizes your own place in the system. It doesn't recognize how you interact with the system and how you interact with other people within the system to shape the system itself. That their focus on the self is basically egotism. Egotism, even if that's marginally good. On the third argument, their third alt solvency, about how ballot is key to recognition, the first argument here is that this is completely empirically denied at the point where Campo's already won a bunch of cap case and Baudrillard case. That is in no way leading to us somehow deconstructing capitalism or deconstructing the hyperreal. That people aren't going to talk about it more. Also, we think that this is completely non-competitive at the point where this argument has already been made and rounded. That it's increasing the education of literally everyone in this room. That we can all talk about this later. That there's a reason that you cannot affirm the plan, there's no reason you can't do the perm. That particularity in this instance is good. That you can still agree with the mindset and you can agree with their framing, but that if the AF is good in this instance, that you should still vote for it. Their next argument is about activism, but we think that our arguments about fiat are always going to be better. That specifically they've conceded my partner's fourth framework argument, that fiat is how we interrogate the power structures and deconstruct that in the first place. That the reason we use fiat is to imagine about ourselves and to actually take control of the state and use it as a liberation method, which is how we can envision better activism, not just activism in the now. On framework, they say that fiat is illusory. The first argument here is that their alt is also completely illusory. They are also fiating their alt, which means that this argument becomes non-unique. The second argument here, crossed by my fiat good arguments above. The second argument here is also that either this is a double bind. Either one, they have no solvency because they're shifting mindsets and fiat does not exist, or two, they have solvency and they're shifting mindsets of the people in this room, or our mindsets or the judge's mindsets, which means that you should pull the trigger on the mindset shell, which is why the mindset shell is going to come before the K. Because in-route education, specifically for norms creation, is always going to be better. The next argument they have is that speech acts are binding. We agree. We think that the perm is not going to be a type of severance at the point where their second alt solvency argument is literally an agreement about that. On the links, the first argument here.
Okay, on the second link specifically, they say that we don't evaluate people as individual moral choices, but we think that this is not true. At the point where policymakers have to use probabilities and have to aggregate that, it is impossible for us to talk about millions of people, and that's actually more unpredictable and skews them out of the ground and is a lot more uneducational for us. Which means that either one, the scope of the round is going to be very, very minimal, and that means that you should that is going to be very minimal. We're only talking about the people in this room, which means that you should prefer the theory argument because we can't evaluate all of that. Or you prefer the perm, at which point we get both the axis of in-round impacts and all of those out-of-round impacts. We agree with their impacts, we're just doing them better. Yeah.
Also, like group action is like rooted in individual action. Like we think that like individual action creates.
Also, we think that group action is rooted in individual action. That group action is also going to lead to individual action. At a point where my partner says that when the Democratic Caucus does something, that means that individual Democrats are also going to do that.
And we're also focusing on specific individuals like Susan.
We think that we're also focusing on specific individuals like Susan Collins and Cory Booker. Go on to the AF. They read terminal defense about Trump, but this is pretty problematic. The first argument here is that we have durable fiat, which means that you can assume that the plan is passed. The second argument here is that we think that the plan is still going to solve at the point where the Congress is going to be able to solve for 2/3 of the majority. What?
The argument isn't this plan is going to pass; it's other ones.
It's going to get vetoed. The next argument is also that long-term Democrats are going to win more elections through more political capital. They've conceded this internal link scenario, which means that Trump won't be able to get anything passed. The next argument is backlash. We think that this mindset means we need to elect more for diversity, which only justifies the second contention.
Alternative solvency, followed by
Wait, sorry, what's first?
yeah, I'll say. Okay. So we're going framework. Good T. Alt solvency. Links and facts. And then case and order.
I thought the code doesn't want one sheet, so if you could send those.
Okay.
Great.
Anyone not ready? Missy sheet, yeah.
What do you need?
I got you. Okay. On to the second argument, the only thing to do is crossed by the fiat is good, but the issue with this is that the usage of fiat in its entire instance is a link into the criticism. The entire criticism is an indictment of the use of fiat. Using fiat in this instance and just ceding control to the government is the type of methodology that uses them, that leads them to talk about people like sheep, that people are just going to start moving in these mass droves up on the passage of this affirmative plan to suddenly voting more affirmative, or to suddenly voting more Democrat. They never give you a specific story on how do these people begin to change these things and why do their mindsets change. They just group all of the American population into one group that then shifts. This type of mindset undermines all possible activism because instead of viewing people as individuals with the ability to think for themselves, they just get grouped into one clump. This is really problematic because it just leads, because that triggers our impacts. Because that triggers our impacts over there. So, like, the entire case in that to fiat, they, like, do not enough work on the alternative level sheets to, like, be voting for, like, the fiat good arguments. Additionally, the second argument that they make is on the speech acts or binding argument. They say that, like, they basically just agree with this fact that our speech acts are binding. And this debate comes down to methodology, Should you be talking about passing the plan through a fiated actor, or should you be looking at it from a pre-fiat, like, individual action standpoint? These two things are different methods. So their co-option of our method into their co-option of our method through the permutation is an act of severance in this instance because they did not run this type of methodology within the first speech, which means that they're just severing their advocacy by running it with the perm. The third argument is this double bind that they make where there's like mindset fiats and stuff. I'll be talking about that on the fiat sheet. Let's go to the fiat sheet.
Extend the critical argumentation must come first.
Oh yeah, extend the argument on the methods. Extend the subpoint on the methods first argument that says that critical argumentation first has to come because we first need to understand how we orient ourselves within the political process first because it's a much larger impact, magnitude impact because it reorients how do we interact with systems of power both inside and outside the round. Whereas this round, where the round education is only like confined to like this one out on theory. We meet your inter. We don't fiat. All right, your interpretation is only you cannot fiat a change of mindset fiat, and we do not use fiat, which means that we do not link it to your interpretation. This is really,
How do we not use fiat?
Yeah, we don't use fiat because the ballot because our alternative asked the judge to, basically take a referendum on, a referendum on methodology. This is not the usage of fiat. Fiat asks you to compare two plans through the same methodology, but our alternative is a referendum on methodology, just like one level removed from this, which means we don't link into the T.
Cross-apply the critical arguments must come first.
Yeah, cross-apply the critical arguments must come first because, the education that we get in this round is probably only confined to this round because we're only talking about this one topic. And additionally, fairness is, arbitrary because there's no clear, instance to tell when, a team dispute other rounds. There's, no impact and, to the show.
K comes before
Means
theory.
K comes before theory, okay. On alternative. The first thing they read is an ivory tower disadvantage because we're only looking interpersonally, we're not looking at interaction between each other. We say that this is much less ivory tower than anything else that's happening because we give people agency to consider how should they be interacting with the state.
The K is literally a critique that asks you to see how you interface with the systems of power.
The thesis of the K asks you to talk about how do you interface with systems of power. That is something that anyone could do. There was no reason why this is ivory tower. In fact, thinking about this from a policymaker standpoint, it's probably much more ivory tower because it positions you within a system of power first, which is something that many marginalized populations can't even conceive of because of their situations. On their lower level solvency arguments. The first argument they made against balance of T's because it's empirically denied because Campbell ones like Beaudry are and stuff. This is none of those arguments. You don't read any specific arguments against our thing, which means this is specifically. And the next argument he made is that there's no spillover. We are reading this K in front of dozens and dozens of people, and we are asking each and every one of you to embrace your own role and complicity. It's just the fact that we are making this speech act in front of you means that you were thinking about it. If you were evaluating this round at the end, you probably should be because all of you people are flowing in the back. You are considering the impact of these arguments. There's no spillover argument over here. The next argument that you make is that fiating stuff is good.
They concede that if this wins, more people will run it.
Yeah, they concede our second ballot argument that said that if we win, more people end up running it, which is important. They make this argument that they cross-apply this argument that FIA is how we integrate with structures of power, but you basically just criticize structures of power from within those own structures of power, which inevitably will lead to a system where you don't end up reforming because the status quo system of power is okay with itself. It does not want to change, and any criticism that takes place through fiat is just going to perpetuate itself. Then they read the perm. They have three external advantages, which are coalition building, praxis, and it gets all of the AF advantages. On the third argument, we said that the entirety AF advantage is probably problematic, especially through the methodology, in which you have it. The second argument that we make is praxis. We give you We give you specific praxis on this because we tell you how does through our ballot key arguments, which then lead to spillover. That is our political form of action. The next argument that they make is the coalition building movement. We said this is probably problematic because the coalition that you're building is only within the state, and you don't use other actors you don't reintroduce the role of the individual into any of that. Additionally, each link to the disadvantage, each link that we read is a disadvantage to the perm. The little Andrews that is the responsibility. The perm includes the affirmative team's fiated plan, which is a replication of the link to governmental demands. That's our first link on the link page. This leads to an obscured view of the role of individuals in violence, which leads to endless violence against populations. The argument is that this is a cause of violence because the AC already happened. They extend our severance argument, which means that their methodology includes the misidentification of violence. The permutation takes the path of least resistance always when implementing through implementation, which means you exclude the neg methodology because it actually requires you to think about your actions instead of just going along with whatever you're told by the government, which is a much easier path to be taking. So the perm always takes path, the perm always fails. On the link level, they can see the entirety of our first link. This is what we're going to be going for. They say that Democrats should just do the plan and they don't put individual action first. That means they link really hard to the K because they're not actually asking individuals to confront their roles of racism. They're just saying that, Suzanne Collins is going to solve it eventually, or Cory Booker is going to solve all these fantastic things eventually. This disincentivizes people from actually engaging within the political system. I'm sorry I don't have time because they don't have any reason to engage with things because they always just view the government as linking into them.
They can see the impact just turns case.
They can see that the impact turns the entirety of case through delocalized violence, which is replicated in every single policy. If Cory Booker passes a policy, but he doesn't have the individuals first confronting their own, but if he first doesn't confront his own complicity within violence, the methodology is not going to be good. On the advantages, they first say durable fiat. This argument is about next things that happen, like bills in the future. Additionally, the congressional override requires 2/3. You don't read any arguments about 2/3. Probably doesn't happen because it's super unlikely to happen. Additionally, they say at least more political capital probably doesn't happen because every single Democrat vetoes the bill, which is not something people like.
I'll be right back. I'll step out real quick. On top, then Here, let's go framework. I have perms and links flowed together, just because I have space there, so I don't know. I'll hit those at the same time. Alternative, impacts, and then case in order. Any questions?
No.
Cool. Time starts now. The thing they're probably going to go for in the final speech is going to be the theory shell. There's a few problems with this. First of all, they concede the thing on the framework that says that case come first. The critical argumentation is the most important thing. The rocket actually shapes our orientation towards real life. Don't let them respond. That's going to be a new response we don't actually have time to respond to. They're never making an argument why theory comes first. This means the K always comes first. The second argument is that we're not actually fiating your mindset. We're saying that the prerequisite you actually voting for the negative is considering your own complicity. Next. Go to the framework sheet. They put nowhere near enough ink on this. We make the argument that fiat is a loser, and they basically say, yeah, sure, it's double bind, but we're saying we're not fiating, right? So as long as that happens, you're not actually weighing the impacts of the case, the K versus the case, meaning you're evaluating the K first. Also, they concede speech acts are binding, right? You know, they can't sever out of the methodology. Next, go to the links. They basically concede the first link, which means they automatically link to the critique. They ask for government help, right? I'm very explicit about this. The idea that we have to go through the government first instead of recognize our own complicity by actually engaging in local activism is the thing that is the link to the critique. That is the biggest link. The idea that we are depoliticized and we can actually influence the world and it's the government that has to act. They never say any response that they pretty clearly link to the K. Next, go on to the perm. Neeraj reads a bunch of perm defense, right? I know, I'm not going to repeat the perm defense.
Extend it.
You can extend the perm defense. Go on to the alternative. There's only a couple of arguments they make on the alternative. The first is ivory tower. This was pretty clearly untrue to the point where we're actually, the people that are actually interrogating our alternative is literally interrogating our role in broader structures of power, right? We are the ones that are externalizing from this stuff. Neeraj makes the turn that fiat is more ivory tower, right? That's a disadvantage to the perm. The next argument they make is the ballot isn't key because specifically Campo's doing stuff. I don't care about Campo. Campo runs weird shit. We're not running weird shit. We're running arguments that are specifically targeted towards the debate community. They can see that there are more people in the debate community that are activists instead of people that are policymakers, meaning this is specifically suited to the debate community. You know, this is a case that's tailored towards the impacts in the real world as we can actually imagine them, as we can actually act on them. Next. They can see the entirety of the impact sheet. That's really, really bad, especially when what the terminalized impact for both of them is Tern's case. Right? They can see the entirety. That means as long as you're actually evaluating impacts, you're pretty clearly voting for the negation. At the point where if you decide somehow to evaluate a case, they've conceded Tern's case on both of them. We say that you're actually destroying all the local activism is the key to solving this kind of delocalized violence, this kind of environmental damages, racism against immigrants. We say that's the actual thing that's going to solve in the long term, and that's how most of this violence is actually inflicted. They concede all of the analysis I do. It turns the entirety of the case, it turns all their impacts. You know, even if you're passing legislation, if you can't get people to change their mindsets, you're not going to change stuff in the long run. They fundamentally mishandle all the impacts. That's going to be really problematic for them. I think you should be thinking about that even before you get to weigh in case you do. So, you're probably not going to get to evaluate case, but if you do, we have some defense stuck onto it, you know, like Trump veto stuff. Doesn't really matter. You probably shouldn't get to evaluating case, but even if you do, you probably shouldn't get to evaluating case because they don't make any arguments that weigh the case against the K, right? But even if you do, the impacts totally turn the entirety of the case. So, right. Oh, I like that. Go back to framework. They can see the role of ballot. Vote for the team that best engages the individual in the political process, right? It's pretty simple. I think we're the ones that are actually recognizing complicity, and as long as they're conceding the impacts, we're the ones that are actually solving for the impacts and actually engaging ourselves best in the political process, right? We're the ones that are solving for the kind of disillusionment that leads to actually saying to the government, you know, needs to do things. We're the only team that does that. They never like, yo, we'll do a speech act about, you know, recognizing complicity. They just say perm. Oh yeah, that's nice. Let's see, is there anything else we need to cover?
Just like like the usage of fiat is not an engagement. It's
Oh
not
yeah,
an
they
engagement.
might also go for this like fiat, this fiat spec, the one I see. They kind of fail to recognize that our entire critique is a critique of the use of fiat, right? I feel like I undercovered perms. Let's go back to perms. Sorry I'm jumping around so much. I'm not great at LORs. Anyways, go back to the perms. The problem with the perms is all the impacts are disadvantage to the perm, right? They're on coalition building, which is the entire purpose of our critique. They're actually talking about practice. We are a critique of the praxis they are using, right? All these advantages they reach to the perms are things that the critique co-opts, which means the critique solves better. And by pushing out the methodology of the negation and prioritizing the act methodology, you're actually killing coalition building as outlined in the impacts. As long as they're conceding the impacts, you can leverage all the impacts against the perm.
Okay. Order will be overview, theory, K, and then case. Everybody ready?
Just the K, like everybody knows, right?
The order of the K would be framework, alt, links, impacts.
Where do you want the overview?
Just on top. Okay, so everybody ready? Time starts now. Vote off theory because they fundamentally misconstrue our definition of fiat, but even if you don't buy that, we're always going to be proving to you that the perm has better solvency and that they relink into their own critique. Let's start off with the theory shell. Remember when we defined theory in our first speech where we say theory is a tool to interrogate dominant power structures to alleviate suffering? They say that our definition of fiat is wrong. Their definition of fiat is wrong. Our argument is that it's a question of let it be, not policy. That means that there is no means that there's no solvency into resolvable. Wait, Danny, like, can you,
What do you mean?
like, expand on this?
Like, just extend the resolvability standard. You can't weigh like how much I am changing my mindset.
Yeah,
Or how
you
much
can't
any
weigh how
judge
much
is
I'm
their
changing my mindset versus how much the judge is changing the mindset. There's no way to empirically, you're not able to weigh that. That means that they're always taking away education and fairness in today's debate. They say fairness. What?
Competitive equity.
They're always taking
Fairness.
competitive equity away in today's debate. That's going to be an
Education always speaks as a question of norms about question of like mindset.
education outweighs because it's a question of norms and mindsets. We see that if you establish bad norms in this round, that's going to be the most important impact because you are establishing these norms for every other round after that. That means that if you buy that this is a bad norm to vote on, it is the number one voting issue. Let's go into the critique.
Wait, on voters, they concede to voters that you either drop the team because it already occurred, or even if you drop the argument,
Even if you drop
like
the
that's just gonna kill all their
that's just gonna
solvency
kill
because
all
either
their
they bite the
solvency
shell,
because either
or
they
they're
bite
not
the shell,
fiating in
or
our
they're not
sense of
actually
fiat,
fiating in
and
our
that means
sense.
that they
That
have no
means that they
solvency
have
because
no
they can't
solvency.
force the judge to
Okay.
recognize their own complicity.
You can't
Which
force the
means
judge to
mindset
recognize
does
their
come
own
before the case.
complicity.
They
Okay.
didn't respond to that.
Yeah, so mindset comes before the critique. Okay, on to framework. First of all, their definition of fiat is completely flawed. That means that all of their index to our fiat are completely flawed as well, at the point where we're not using the state, but we're instead interrogating dominant power structures. That means that our definition of fiat doesn't link into their framework. But secondly, we think that our framework is always going to be better, and for a couple of reasons. We think that our framework allows for the most equitable division of the debate, which is always going to be what else on framework?
Just go
Okay.
to all.
Okay, yeah, alt. The perm solves. Basically, we see that if we don't link into the critique, or if they relink into the critique, that means that there is no net benefit, or there's no net harm to do the perm. If the perm is a test of competition, we think clearly in their articulation of the perm, their perm comes before our affirmation, but that's still a perm. We see that you can still do what they say, but also do what the affirmation, and there's a couple of net benefits to this. Number one is going to be praxis, and they say that, praxis is bad and that it relinks into the K, but we think that that is not true. Like, if we are continuously just thinking about our mindset, but never actually create any action, that means that they literally have no impact off their K. Focusing on consequences is always going to be key to understanding how we can use our individual action to achieve something. But secondly, remember that individual action is the root of coalition building. That means that at the point where we're advocating for coalition building as well, we recognize the fact that individual action only achieves an impact when we create these coalitions, which is going to be really important because the perm creates those coalitions. On to links. What?
They're all creates a starting point, but there's literally nothing after that's entailed.
They're all creates a starting point, but there's nothing
which means
after
that
that.
the perm is always going to solve for things
Which
that's after.
means the perm is
Also,
always going to solve for things
They've
after.
conceded the turn I read that there's
The argument that the permutation functions as giving, more substance to the alternative after the alternative takes place is a new argument in the anon.
No, that was our perm text.
You're our panel, so we're gonna have to take it into consideration.
Cool.
and
Okay, time starts now.
and they've conceded my turn on the second alt solvency argument that argument is just a justification for the
their
perm.
argument is just a
They literally say
justification for the
government
perm.
action is best
like their
after.
literal second solvency point is saying that government
But they
action
don't
is
guarantee
needed
it.
after like the alternative. They never provide that. Government action, only the affirmation does. On the links, we think that they relink at the point where they are referring to this entire room as a group. That means that they're relinking into their critique. Danny very clearly says that at the point where they're decreasing individual action by saying, oh, you and the entirety of this room should vote a certain way. That means that they're really relinking into their critique. The only way that they're linking us into the critique is that by saying that we are using state action, but at the point where we give you specific to individual actors and talk about how those individual actors are creating more productivity, that means that we have less of a link into the critique than they do. At that point, you're always going to vote them down because they are linking into their critiques. That means that we are not mishandling their impacts, we're just turning their impacts. Obviously, their impacts are bad, and we're never going to argue against them or turn their impacts, but we're saying that they're linking into their impacts more than we are, and at the point where they don't actually specifically describe how state action decreases individuality, at the point where we're focusing on specific individuals like Cory Booker and Susan Collins, that means that we are always linking into the KLS. On to Case. They severely mishandle Case when we tell you that when Democrats win the incumbency advantage, that means that they'll always have more power to gain more votes, but they also mishandle the fact that Democrats winning is always going to be a net benefit because Trump will always have to work with Democrats regardless. At this point, that means that we are winning off that advantage on K. They completely don't respond to our turns on the second advantage where their mindset is that of never actually electing anyone who's diverse because that's always going to create backlash. That's going to be really problematic at the point where speech acts are binding. That means that they're literally advocating to not vote for people who are diverse, and we think that's really problematic.
Point of order. The argument that our turn on the second sheet case is like a speech act is somehow like has implications, outsiders to the advantage in New York.
Okay, we think that like
And
at
then
the, okay, we think that at the point that the framework says that everything is a speech act and is binding, like I don't think that's a new articulation, but up to judge's discretion.
Consideration.
Okay. Time starts now. So at the end of the day, here's how you should vote. You should vote off theory because we think that establishing norms is more likely than people running this critique later. That means that establishing the norms of debate and making sure that fiat is actually used as a tool to create fiat is actually used in the proper way and that it creates competitive equity is always going to be the most important impact. But below that, first of all, if you don't vote off T, they at least mitigate their impact because they can only change the mindset of a select few. We think that the point where they're relinking into their critique, that's always going to be problematic, and the perm always solves better than that because we create coalitions. At the end of the day, we win on Case, so that means that you're also voting off of that on that level. For all these reasons, vote.